speakers. We're going to bring up our next speaker, and actually we're going to shift gears because this is a keynote session. So Adrian Scott is the founder and CEO of Soma Capital. The session he's doing is Blockchain and Beyond. He's also the head of technology at Decent Bet, a post-ICO crypto casino, and he's the co-inventor of a U.S. patent related to hashing algorithms on P2P networks. So let's give him a big round of applause. Welcome, sir.
Thank you all. It's a pleasure to be here today with you. So I would, first, it's exciting to be here in Malta because my family actually has a couple connections here through the decades, and one of my ancestors drew this photo that did not appear here. Oh, okay, great. So anyhow, painted, this painting is, I think, from around 1910, 1908. Of the some of the Maltese ships, fishing boats. A little background on me. I think this has been mentioned already, and I do code, so I am technical. I'm involved with a couple of projects, and would love to share some forward-looking thoughts on kind of blockchain and beyond. Soma Capital is managing some crypto investment assets, and also incubating a couple of new crypto projects, which we will be talking about later this year. Decent Bet is a crypto casino, which is interesting in that it runs on a zero-profit model in a way that supports the token. So a very interesting model. Amongst our team, we include the former chairman of the Nevada Gaming Commission, Mark Liparelli. And I don't know if you follow poker, but maybe you saw Phil Hellmuth win his 15th bracelet in the World Series of Poker a few days ago, and perhaps saw his entrance dressed as Thor with 14 Wonder Woman carrying D-bet shields and so on. Anyhow, so we have some very interesting things coming up this year. One interesting thing is we recently announced a shift to the VeChain blockchain, which some of you may be aware of or may not be familiar with. A couple of interesting aspects there from a technical perspective is one of the challenges with Ethereum is that your customers are actually paying transaction costs just to use your dApp and interact with your smart contracts. And VeChain lets us sponsor those transaction fees. Interestingly, it also uses the Solidity language, so we are able to port our existing smart contracts over to this platform. And instead of gas and such, their terminology is around Thor. So we're all kind of weird here in crypto and thinking beyond the traditional, and so I just love this little saluting the weirdness in you. Namaste, but weird mistake. One of the things that happens a lot is we get into fighting with each other. I was at one conference the other day, and in the lunch line, somebody said, "You're doing blockchain, right?" And I was like, okay, where is he coming from on this? And I said, yes. And then he was like, okay, well, so he turned his back on me kind of thing. And so we are easy to make breaks between us rather than kind of looking to understand and find what we have in common and what we are moving towards. And the other day I was walking down actually here in Malta and saw this kind of perfect mention in relation to Bitcoin. I'm not perfect, but I am limited edition, because we have all these folks who say, well, I love blockchain, but not Bitcoin. It's interesting. We talk a lot about decentralization or centralization, and another way to think about that is really to think about power ratios. And we were talking about the power, why did Bitcoin get created in the first place? Was about this power ratio of fiat governments to be able to print unlimited money. So if we think about power ratios in the context of our projects, and also going back to federal government versus the individual, state government versus the individual, federal government versus the state government, I think that's relevant in helping us guide how we map our future forward, how we create new projects, and what we think of as our goals. We have interesting things going on in the trends right now. We have increasing numbers of countries. We have increasing longevity as we live longer, as we are able to correct some of the metabolic decay that we experience as humans. And one of the things that Peter Thiel has spoken about a little bit is this intersection of things that seem not good, but actually is good. And Paul Graham from Y Combinator has spoken about this as well. And I think it's great for us to keep that in mind as well as we are creating projects and looking at which projects we support. As we communicate with folks, one of the interesting challenges is explaining blockchain, right? People are like, well, I kind of get it, but I kind of don't, right? And so one of the helpful things we can do is develop analogies and better ways to communicate about this. And one thing that's kind of fun to think about is if you're in a crowded bar, how do you get a drink? What do you do to get a drink from the bartender? There's just a few bartenders. How do you get a drink in the crowded bar? You're probably pulling out a $1 bill and waving it, right? It's like, I'm going to tip you. I'm going to give you a great tip. And that's kind of how these blocks get mined in blockchains. And what does the bartender have? He has one of these auto taps, but it doesn't work all the time. And that's him guessing these hashes, right? So he has to keep, so you got a bunch of bartenders going after your tip, and they keep pressing the button on the auto tap to give you the drink that you want. And then, one of them gets it and gets you a drink and then hands you give them their tip, which is your transaction fee. But we are living in a crypto world that has all kinds of different projects going on. Some of them are centralized, some of them are decentralized, some of them are in between. How do we think about this? What is important? And then what term do we use? Do we use blockchain? Do we use crypto? Do we use cryptocurrency? Some people hear crypto and they're like, well, that's only for cryptography, right? And you're using it as cryptocurrency. So what I'm using as a term so far, and I invite you to challenge me on it, is looking towards projects that are decentralized, crypto-enabled platforms. So obviously that does not include a Ripple, a centralized project. But the thing that is new is this decentralized nature that Satoshi Nakamoto came up with. So how do we find and develop these projects that are crypto-enabled? So we're using these tools, combining them in interesting and different ways. One of the exciting areas is decentralized autonomous organizations. I was doing an interview with Vice recently, and the reporter wrote this down as decentralized economic organizations. And after that, I was like, okay, that's kind of interesting, because it kind of maps as well to a certain extent. Decentralized autonomous or decentralized economic organizations. And actually, this is what got me back into crypto. After starting in 2013 with Bitcoin, I built a meta exchange that would let you trade across all the Bitcoin exchanges at the time. And the DAO behind Dash, actually, is what one thing that really excited me and reinvigorated the passion for crypto and blockchain and Bitcoin. So how many of you are familiar with the DAO in Dash? Okay. So I invite you to, if you're not familiar with it, please check it out. And just as a model, I'm not asking you to invest in Dash or anything like that. Just look at what they've done there. Look at how they've pivoted the project. And what they do is with the mining rewards that they have, 45% goes to the miner, 45% goes to master nodes, who provide services for anonymization, remixing, or fast transfers. And the remaining 10% goes to a DAO. And in that DAO, the masternode holders can vote on different proposals. And anybody here in this room can submit a proposal to be funded by that DAO. And you have to pay a little bit to submit your proposal. And if you get voted on and you get support, that actually can be approved, and you can get paid in Dash for doing something that convinces the voters, that the masternode folks, that this will advance the ecosystem. And then looking forward and considering this model of looking at things as a decentralized crypto-enabled platforms, what we can think about then is the different tools, the different ingredients that projects are using and combining, and how we can combine those into new ways of doing things, new projects, new blockchains, new protocols. And an example of some of those tools, we have hashes, we have Merkle trees, we have PGP signatures, and then we have all these graph structures that computer science and computer scientists have developed for us. So that helps bring us towards things like DAGs, directed acyclic graphs. So what is a DAG? You could even just take one of the pieces of paper in front of you and put a few dots on it with your pen, and then draw a few lines between them. And it's that simple. So we have a graph, so a few nodes. We have arrows that between the lines, so that implies and shows the direction. And then we also do not have a circle. And that's how simple a DAG is. And some versions of this, one project I like in this space of DAGs is Gould, G-U-L-D, and they kind of call it a block tree. So we used a blockchain, right? But how about a block tree? And this enables, there's a bunch of DAG projects out there that have had problems, right? Like IOTA and so on. But there's still something here, I believe, and it creates kind of different subtrees that we can have different things happening in. So we can have communities within a certain subtree. We can even have additional currencies for those communities within a certain part of the subtree. And that's a neat way, for us to start thinking as we move forward and create new protocols and new projects. And let's see. One of the things that have brought a lot of us through to crypto and blockchain and Bitcoin has been a desire to create change, to create freedom. And we are running into some challenges around that right now. You remember this guy, right? Napster. So it was interesting because Napster kind of created this certain level of freedom, but Napster had a centralized index, right? And so it was vulnerable to challenges based on that. And probably the biggest mistake the record label has made back then is they could have owned 90% of Napster just as a deal, right? And in exchange for letting Napster continue to exist. And then they could have controlled a centralized index over this digital music distributor that was the biggest digital music distributor in the world. They didn't do that, and so Bram created BitTorrent, after other folks created Nutella and other things back then. So let's play a little game. Y2K, right? We had Y2K challenge come up a while ago. We also have a challenge coming up now with the private key cryptography and the quantum computing that is coming together. So how many more years will our existing Bitcoin structure last as these quantum computers come in? If we're creating new protocols, are we using quantum resistant algorithms and mechanisms to build that out? And talking about freedom change, we are all having to deal with this beast that is called anti-money laundering, right? And let's see how great that system has worked. Anti-money laundering system 1.0 still lets this happen, still lets Odebrecht, since 2003, do all kinds of massive scale of bribery. So there's something wrong there, and we need to kind of think about how we talk to that community, that industry, for an AML 2.0, and is there a chance to build that based on less control instead of trying to control everything? But at the same time, what did we give people with Bitcoin and so on? What are we giving people with crypto? We're giving transparency to the governments And sometimes the governments aren't being transparent either. So if I get paid in crypto and I pay somebody in crypto with some of that money, they can track back and see how much I've been getting paid. So I think the freedom is important, and I'm eager to connect with other folks who share that passion. As we talk about investing, one of the things that's interesting is a lot of the folks who are trading and investing in crypto are not aware of the history of trading. There's some really interesting work that is being done in technical analysis as it relates to trading irrational markets. Ed Sekoda's work, the Trading Tribe, is also very interesting. I encourage you to check those out. The book's by Jack Schwager. I've spoken with a lot of crypto traders, and they're not even aware of this history and these amazing resources. Brett Steenbarger is another great mind in this space. I welcome you to take a photo of this, and I try to always share security tips because it's really easy to lose your crypto. I even see famous blockchain speakers who are mentioning items that are not totally quite accurate. And if please definitely update me if you see any better solutions than what I suggest here. And so I'll leave this up as we get into opening up for a couple questions. One of the big missing pieces of the puzzle for freedom, besides these privacy, supporting privacy currencies such as Monero, Dash, and whatnot, we also need mesh networks, and we also need cell phones. Cell phones that are not, just surveillance machines. So I am a business person. I'm excited about building businesses and so on, and also supporting freedom and change. The next step forward, I think, for us as we are dealing with all this regulation that is limiting our ability, I hear people saying, well, if we just get the regulation lets the money flow in. The regulation does let money flow in, but it also caps our potential, right? Because it lowers the business potential because we've got this business overhead that is extreme in many cases and makes no sense in many cases. I was speaking with lawyers in a new jurisdiction I'm talking about working with, and they sent me their KYC lists. One of them was asking for a police report. And I was like, well, that's a little weird. Is that a government requirement, or is that your firm's requirement? Because the only time I've had to do that has been when I've requested, permanent residency for a government. The other lawyer was asking, for a copy of all your passports. It's like, well, that's not really know your client anymore, right? Would you like to follow me into the bathroom too? So it's a matter of pushing, so I'm pushing back on these lawyers. I'm like, hey, is this a government requirement? Is this your invention? And so moving some of my projects from, the British, the BOTs, British owned territories, BVI and Caymans are now under significant pressure from the UK. So for new projects, I'm looking at other jurisdictions that are not, getting dominated by the UK, and which is adding more and more regulatory waste into that process. The exciting new things is competitive governance, Liberland. So I'm setting up a corporation under Liberland and looking to support that project and invite others to as well as create additional crypto countries. So I invite you to join me in this, leveraging this technology and not giving up on freedom and privacy and change as we build businesses, real businesses that impact and spread this to others. Thank you.
All right, Adrian, thank you so much. Does anyone have a question for Adrian? We got time for a question? I guess not. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
We do? Yep. Again, because we're live streaming, if you could just say your name and where you're from.
Yes, Sean Barger, Equilibrium. You had just mentioned that you're exiting Cayman and BVI, or you think that that's not a good idea. Could you just kind of elaborate on that a little bit as to why? Because
Sure.
everything's leading me that direction for a number of tax reasons currently.
Yeah, and these are my personal, I'm not representing any of my projects. These are personal comments for my new projects. If you look up the news, there was a recent thing passed in the UK where they're requiring the BOTs to list in a public registry the beneficial owner or owners of corporations in those jurisdictions. So this is a pretty major new change. Obviously many folks can still deal with this. I do still have BVI entities, but do we want to reward with our attention and our economics? Do we want to reward those jurisdictions with that? I'm happy to mention, in private, a couple others I'm looking at this point. I'm not perfectly happy with any of those. I love Liberland, but it's obviously not connected into some of the networks that we'd like to connect into yet. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, is that for operating entities or trusts?
Both. We've got, just like I said, we've got the chance to kind of, Malta is doing exciting stuff with the casino we're setting up in Malta. We love that. And then for other projects, we have choices, right? And so let's look a little closely on those, and let's bring our attention, our time, our teams, and our resources to those jurisdictions that are really going to support us, that are willing to, question the default mechanisms and say, what is really necessary to cover those concerns that they do legitimately have.
All right, great. Well, Adrian, thank you very much. Let's give it up for Adrian.